room, the library, the secret library, finding the notebooks of Victor Frankenstein. Such strange goings on. 10 designers would have, of course, done it 10 different ways, but this designer, Dale Hennessy, and this director of photography, Jerry Hirschfeld, were completely in tune with what the script was about, which was not how can we make fun, but how can we make it real, which will make it more fun.
It could work!
When Mel would just pull lightly on the reins for Madeline or me or Cloris, if he wasn't getting what he wanted, he would start tugging. And Marty didn't respond well to the tugging. I don't mean that there was anger or fights or anything like that, but as soon as the reins were loosened, Marty would respond like anyone with freedom. Now, that means that maybe he would go off half-cocked in the wrong direction, but the next take, he'd go off full-cocked in the right direction.
I'll never forget my old dad. When these things would happen to him, the things he'd say to me.
What did he say?
What the hell are you doing in the bathroom day and night? Why don't you get out of there? Give someone else a chance.
My really personal feeling about Mel is that he is a consummate comedic director. I haven't worked with anybody that has his talent. Once I can detach myself from watching my lighting on a take, I'm watching the performance. And I'd see a performance, let's say it was with the Monster and Dr. Frankenstein, and I said, geez, that's awfully good. And Mel would say, let's do it again. I said, geez, that looked perfect to me. But the next take was even better. I don't know what he would say to the actors. He'd walk up to them and speak to them, and it was his expertise. And sometimes this would go on for 2, 3, or 4 takes, and each one got better and better.
This is a nice boy. This is a good boy. This is a mother's angel.
What begins as a joke doesn't necessarily end up being what's on the screen. You have to baby it, and you have to try it many different ways. And it may seem funny to you one way if it's just a character reading it on camera and it's hysterical, but you have to integrate it with the things that are around it and finding the balance for that.
A riot is an ugly thing. And I think that it is just about time that we had one!
We knew we were getting what we wanted. We were getting beyond what we wanted, because after every take, there'd be laughter and, you know, it was just gelling. You know, it's, when you work with an ensemble cast like that and it gels, you know, it's marvelous.
I think this was Mel's most brilliant day, but Madeline Kahn arrives, my fiancée. Mel improvised this on the spot, and Marty says, okay, you take the blonde, I'll take the one in the toy bin. How it came to toy bin, I don't know. You take the blonde, I'll take the one in the toy bin, and Mel told him to bite the head of the fox fur that she was wearing.
Oh.
Stop that.
It took, I would say, conservatively, 8 or 9 takes, because every time he bit the fur, there was always fur left in his mouth. And we couldn't not laugh. I tried. After the first or second, I said, well, what do you expect? But the third, fourth, fifth, sixth...
Igor, would you give me a hand with these bags?
Certainly. You take the blonde and I'll take the one in the toy bin.
Stop that!
Yes, basta.
May I go in?
We finally did, as I say, either the 8th or 9th, and I held it It took great moral strength. I held on. It looked as if maybe I was holding back some kind of anger at him, but it really was holding back the quivering mouth from not wanting to laugh. We all laughed, and Marty was so funny doing it.
Let me smell your breath.
I had a problem with my camera operator. It wasn't a bad problem, it was a good problem. And the problem was that there was so much hilarity. I mean, what was going on was so funny that he'd sit on the camera and he'd start laughing. And in laughing, he would shake the camera.
Why, look, you haven't even touched your food.
There. Now I've touched it.
If you're going to laugh, do it on the rehearsals. But please, when we're shooting the picture, don't laugh, you're jiggling the camera.
Thank heavens that's over with.
It was a great ensemble piece, no problem whatsoever. They were all laughing their way through this film. It was Terry's, first real film.
It's terrible the price society demands in the name of fidelity, isn't it? I mean, what is fidelity, after all?
Not fooling around?
Cloris, provided lots of laughter for us all.
Follow me, please.
Cloris was straight as an arrow, which made it so funny. But as soon as the take was over, she'd burst into laughter because she knew it was so funny what she was doing.
Oh, does that include the key to the laboratory?
You mean the laboratory.
Oh, gee, don't laugh. It's so much better.
There was no problem on this movie at all. The only problem was I had to stay away from the set because I was laughing too much during the filming of the piece.
Now listen to me very carefully.
I stopped production a couple of times, not to leave, because it was hilarious, the interaction amongst the group.
Doctor, there's that strange music again.
It seems to have stopped the big fellow in his tracks.
That music. That quaint.
All right.
I tried hard not to laugh.
They're up on the roof, and the lightning is flashing in the sky, and this big electrode is arcing to the body, and they cut to a close-up of the head. And a lot of people have wondered, well, they know that it wasn't Peter Boyle because the head begins to glow. We begin to see the teeth, the skeleton. They said, how was that created? It was a model had been made of Peter Boyle's head. And Bill Tuttle, who was the makeup artist and created the whole design for the monster, had replicated his head in plastic. And inside he had, by some magic, put rows of teeth and a little brain tissue and whatnot, and a light. And we just brought that light up on a dimmer, and the head would glow, and we'd take it down, and it would unglow, and it was pulsing, in other words. And it was a highlight of the creation.
It was at one point, I think we were doing a temp dub, and he was doing the scene with Kenny Mars with the dart game, and he kept throwing the darts out the window because he'd give him a shot every time every time the Gene was up throwing a dart. And Mel felt that the timing started to get a little dull at that point, and it was just a simple thing, and you actually hear it in the film now when I think it's on the third throw, he throws it out the window, and you hear this.
Seem unusually upset by this discussion.
Not in the least.
And of course it was Mel. That's actually Mel's voice.
The monster sits on the seesaw, and he sits down, and of course there again is another close-up gag line, because she says, let's do a seesaw, and he's about to get on there, and he looks right into the camera, and that expression alone sets up the gag, and he sits down, and of course the girl flies through the air. Well, these days it would be done, you could do it digitally and electronically on a computer, but at that time we had to actually put a cable on the young lady and fly her through the air. And the problem is not to be able to see that cable because there's no retouching. And that becomes a trick in itself. And it's done through lighting and through doing little painting dabs on the cable and making sure the background it's against is not going to make it stand out.
We had a problem in the scene where the operation has been unsuccessful and they're upstairs, and he's very distraught, and all of a sudden they hear the groaning and they run down and they start to, I guess, let him up. And at that point there was a lot of dialogue that went on in the scene, and it hadn't been covered in a way so that we could get it out easily. And ultimately we had to go back to a piece of film that we used in the scene at the bookcase, a piece of Terry Garr, and we blew her up so that, and you'll notice it's a very big head close-up, and she kind of goes, and we put that in so that we could jump over a bunch of dialogue and move on to the end of the scene, which ultimately Mel had found was bogging the scene down. And you know, it's kind of tricks of the trade.
What we would do is assemble a reel. He would go around and invite all these secretaries from the lot to come down to the theater and run it. He'd go around the lot and say, "Can you come to a movie? Can you come and see a reel or two and listen to the laughs and rework the reel?"
He really pioneered that.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want studio executives.
Exactly.
He wanted people that as close to being off the street as he could on short-term notice.
I would see things in the first screening that I didn't think Mel would want in the final, but he's the director. And I'd say, he said, I know, but let me try it out again to see if the audience, and we'd have a second screening with secretaries, and butchers and bakers and candlestick makers to see what the reaction was.
Sometimes an audience is on top of a joke before you know it. You think you're telling it well, but the fact of the matter is they know it's coming.
Whether it's comedy or it's just dialogue, it's the beats before the line, the laugh, frames. I'm talking about a few frames added can change the whole feel of it.
I say there's the possibility of electrocution. Do you understand?
I understand. Why are you shouting?
Editors went to previews. People went out and sat in the audience and felt the audience more so than today, where people go through, psychologists come in and give people forms, and this is what people wrote down, so this is what it means. That you really learned how to feel an audience, and if they're getting bored in the story, you look 10 minutes prior to that, not right where they're getting bored.
As the writer, I saw, what are you doing to my script? As a director in an embryo state, I said, I understand that he's thinking of the whole picture, not just this scene, but what kind of a movie is it going to be?
What a filthy job.
Could be worse.
How?
Could be raining.
It so often happens when you're going to your first preview. At the end, the director and everybody, I mean, they want to get air out. They want to make sure everything's playing quickly, and there becomes this panic, about is the movie going to be perceived as being slow and dull. And Mel was starting to take out some gags, and at one point he said, well, we're going to take out the gag at the railroad station in Transylvania where Marty says to Gene, walk this way. And Stan said, no, please don't do that, please. And Mel said, no, it's coming out, it's a cheap joke. And Stan said, yeah, it's a cheap joke, but it's funny. Please don't take it out. So finally, Mel relented and said, okay, it'll stay for the preview, but it's coming out Saturday. That scene came on, the audience howled. And we came up to Mel afterwards out on the sidewalk. We said, all right, so do we take it out tomorrow? And he said, get out of here. And I give Stan the credit for that, because Mel may well have taken it out of the movie and you never would have seen it.
Before the wrap party, he fought with the heads of studios and everything. And he had every cast member and everybody walk out of this. They were shooting up stairs and come down.
Stairs.
We were going to end the movie with it. He said he had to have that shot.
For end titles.
For end titles. I don't think it ever went in the show anyway. But he got that. And I don't know what it was, but I know it was a big fight, but he went out. And that's how they all walked down. We started the wrap party from there.
Well, we had some previews, so we knew that people really liked the film. There was no doubt in our mind that people liked it, but you never know, you know, until the day the film opens, if the public is going to come to see it.
See Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, starring Gene Wilder as the doctor, Peter Boyle as the monster, Marty Feldman as the hunchback, Cloris Leachman as the lady with a cigar, Kenneth Mars as the inspector, Terry Garr as the woman, Madeline Kahn as the other person. Young Frankenstein, containing such classic cinematic moments as...
Young Frankenstein, rated PG.
We opened it up around Christmas time in '74, and there were a lot of very big movies, and so the competition was going to be really, really tough. And there we were, you know, doing business like Blazing Saddles, which was also a big hit. So because of those two films, Mel became a major player in town. And prior to Blazing Saddles, he couldn't get arrested for 3 years.
I happen to have a very close personal friend who's got 2 children. At the time, they might have been, they are now in their teens, but at the time they were about 8, 10, or 12, or something like that. They bought a tape of Young Frankenstein, a videotape, and wore it out. They knew the lines. They knew all the gag lines. And these were young kids. And they could relate. They could relate to the story of Young Frankenstein, even though they might not have ever seen the original Frankenstein. They probably didn't.
How very nice to meet you, Constable.
People that I meet, and they say, well, you did that movie, God, it's... And they start giving me lines from the film.
Luca!
It just seemed that everything was there, and there were so few things in that film that were forced.
Didn't you used to have that on the other side?
What?
Your, oh, never mind.
I mean, it really was basically all there. It was trimmed down, and some things were deleted, but that it was all there. There were no big reshoots like there are today. It's they hit it.
I think it's the best thing Mel did as a filmmaker, not just as a comedian or comedy. I think it's a total film.
I think the thing that makes Frankenstein live as a concept, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a creature disformed, who has love in his heart, wants to be loved, and is misunderstood, is a classic theme. People have tried it in other ways, but it's always worked best, I think, in the Frankenstein frame. And even though we were doing a comedy, a ridiculous comedy, that classic theme is still there. And I think that's why it lives.
And now, let us all go to my house for a little sponge cake and a little wine.